This is Future Sense Now, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. Future Sense Now is brought to you by the Futures Forum. Stay tuned for a journey to the futures of women with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to Future Sense Now, an online e-magazine of the Futures Forum. It is March 2018 and we're celebrating Women's History Month and International Women's Day with an exploration into the future history of women, Women 2030 and beyond. Why? Well, Goal 5 speaks specifically to the development and inclusion of women, and a recent trend report that we put out, women futurists are watching the fact that for this year, more and more women are seeking elected leadership, starting their own organizations, and leading organizations around the world. So in this segment, I'm delighted to be joined by our very special guest, Valerie Agebragba, who is the Vice President of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations and Chair of the Committee of Women in Engineering. She's a registered metallurgical and materials engineer and has her engineering practice in quality control, assurance, in construction projects, and in the power sector. She's also a past president of the Association of Professional Women Engineers of Nigeria and a past vice president of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. So I'm very excited to have her join us. How are you? Greetings, Madam President, Vice President. How are you?
Yeah. I'm fine, thank you, Claire. Greetings to you, and I'm delighted to be with you this evening, and I hope we can have a fruitful discussion.
Yes, one of the reasons why we decided to talk to Valerie in her position as Vice President for the World Federation of Engineering Organizations is the fact that many people are so focused around global agenda and economics of development that they forget that much of development is driven by the science and technology and the engineering of development. As an engineer myself, I'm always excited to bring engineering into the conversation as to how we grow our future that works for most. And so I'm excited about having somebody who is working at a global level with an organization which I do believe also has its own vision of the role of engineering and addressing these grand challenges. So tell me, Barry, tell me, what does the Women's Engineering Committee hope to achieve in World Federation Engineering Organizations?
Yes, thank you, Claire. Some years back, about 10 years ago, the World Federation of Engineering Organizations realized that it's a global thing to see engineering being dominated by the men, and they felt this was the time for them to encourage more women into it, not just into engineering, but into leadership in the global scene. And this gave birth to the committee 10 years ago. A group of past presidents thought this was wise, and they worked together to create this committee. We had a colloquium in Tunisia, and after that, we came up with a committee. And the main focus are three. One is to work on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And secondly, we talk about building capacity and increasing empowering women to leadership position. And our third focus is on strategic indicators, because globally you have very low percentage of women in engineering and technology. And most of the time you don't have the accurate data. So this was very important for the global organization, that we need to really have a count on the number of women involved. And so we are able to measure efforts put in to encourage more women into the organization. And so we have those three focuses: capacity building and empowerment, diversity and inclusion, and of course, strategic indicators. So that's what we are focused on.
Well, again, for folks, the World Federation of Engineering Organizations is made up of national organizations from several countries around the world. Now, from my perspective, looking at the future of grand challenges around water and energy and food and health, those big four, let's call those the big four, how do you see women getting into engineering, especially if we're looking at Africa, for example, where we still have women have very hard lives at the village level. Is there a
Yeah.
way in which women in engineering may rethink even how engineering is formulated so that women, girls in the villages can be taught engineering principles and begin to transform their history even at that level of, let's say, 9, 10, 11 years old? What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, if you look at old technology, traditional engineering, which really comes from our rural areas and the women in this environment, you see that they are already involved in engineering, but done in the crude way. If you go to the typical African village, you see them having putting firewood together to make the fire, to roast whatever they have to do. And they have these grains, what they shake, like a sieve, where in engineering you have the different sizes. These women have been able to crudely do some of these things. So if you go to the villages, it's so easy to tell them what engineering is all about, because the woman in the rural area bears the brunt of making things work in the household. And so she's able to get the firewood or energy. She's able to think of how to turn the farm produce into something for the family to use. She's able to work on how she can move her products, even from the farm down to the home. So you realize that it's so easy for us. We have realized that in visiting villages, that it's so easy to tell them that engineering is all around them. And so they easily understand what we're talking about. They easily buy into the fact that getting more into education can make their girl child go into engineering. So we only just need to enhance the way we portray this to them, bringing it down to their level. And we started doing that in Africa.
I'm very happy to hear that, because when you think about the year 2030, that's why I asked you about the students. If you are
Yeah.
18 years old today, in 30,
Yeah.
in 12 years, you'll be 30 years old, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you look at the future history of women in engineering, and let's take the African continent, how, is there the policy? Are there are getting support from, let's say, the major organizations, the funding agencies, to really drive different levels of engineering skills? It's not only those who can, let's say, do the big designs, but as the technology people.
Yeah.
What have you seen um, happening now for the 18-year-olds to actually exhibit by 2030? We'll see that leap change in women in engineering.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe one other area we have decided to move away from, and which most organizations are focusing on, is trying to develop an innovative mindset for the female students who are 18 now. I
Yes.
mean, looking at your environment, what are your immediate problems, and then begin to develop a problem-solving mindset around you. We have issues. There is the issue of the clean water to drink. There's the issue of sanitation around your environment. There's the issue of energy. So what can we do right now? So the best thing is not to wait for the blueprint organizations to come in to change it for us. Let's begin to develop a mindset of problem solving, a
And I would
problem
say to
solving
some extent,
mindset, an innovative mindset.
but and as I hear that, what I'm hearing that, if you think about the average household in poor countries, problem solving in many ways has to be your lifestyle, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because if you are,
It's
go ahead.
go ahead. Let me get a question.
And I'm saying, like, if you are a poor person in, like, a slum area in Lagos, for example, you have to have a problem solving
Yeah.
mindset. So the question is,
Yeah.
as women in Nigeria, for example, become more and more in the leadership, you are in the leadership of the engineering disciplines,
Yeah.
for example.
Mm.
How are you able to transform the way in which the engineering community works with, say, the high schools that they came from or the universities they came from, to basically inculcate this change for the future?
Yeah, one of the things I'll say, one of the things we're doing right now, we've gotten into the rural environment and we realize that sanitation is very poor in that area. We've also realized that they don't have energy, because most of our universities are not in the city centers. They are not too far from the rural environment. And so the women around there should be able to benefit from the university community around them. And so we are using most of the students now to create a community-led total sanitation around those villages within the community environment, the university environment. So community-led total sanitation, it's something that you have to use those traditional ways of doing things to eradicate this open defecation, remove the smell, and make people realize that you are hurting yourself by having this open defecation around your environment. So the students are getting involved now, community work, working with the community, women and children especially, because they are the worst hit when you have such bad environment. So we are bringing the students out of their comfort zone within the university environment to go into the nearby communities and change their life. So it's like a go back to the rural environment and make an impact. And the only way you can make an impact is solving their immediate problem. So that is one of our major focus for this year. We are also now getting girls to get to understand what the solar home systems are when it comes to energy, getting to the villages to help the rural women exchange their lanterns, their kerosene lamp for solar home systems. So these are some of the things we're doing to bring in the university students. And then we are also bringing a competition to them. Give us a design in the energy sector, in the agricultural sector, that will help the rural woman live a better life as a female engineer. This competition is going to be launched sometime in March, actually during the International Women's Day celebration in Paris. And we believe most of the girls from developing countries is actually for girls from developing countries to get involved in this competition, solve a problem within your community in the energy sector and also in the agricultural sector. And we believe this will actually expose them to know that engineering is not just for the urban, it's also for the rural women to make life better for them. So these are some of the areas we are looking at, and we believe by the end of this year, we should be able to tell our success stories on these projects.
Let me ask you a question. You have held very high office in the Nigerian Professional Engineering Society. How did you find it as one of the first? I assume, were you one of the first female vice presidents?
No, I wasn't. I had about 4 or 5 women before me who were vice presidents. But the fact is we have never had a female president in the Nigerian Society of Engineers.
So you have like a concrete ceiling. So how did you find that? In other words, we hear so much about the male-female relationship in Africa being paternalistic in many ways, but we have heard also stories about the traditional role of the feminine principle in Africa. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, from a traditional perspective, how have women in leadership, right, in the professional life, been able to, let's say, come up against men in leadership from a traditional, let's say, village life? How do you manage that tension?
Things are changing, but they tend to accept you when they know that, I mean, you're not competing with the men, and we're only enhancing each other to achieve a common goal. It's a bit tough because sometimes they look at it that, I mean, you shouldn't really be in this environment. You should be back home taking care of your immediate family. But I believe, like I said, I'm not the first female engineer to have gotten there. I have women who have also laid some very good examples that, yes, we can combine home and combine our profession with leadership and still be able to have our heads high above. And so it was easier for me because I had people before me. But then it was still more challenging because the African man has just not taken it that a woman should be able to lead them. And it's really tough in engineering. It's really, really a tough one. I would say recently I was lucky, let me use the word blessed enough to be able to compete for the deputy president position, which gives you an automatic ticket to become the president. And I saw that, yes, people say you're good. Then the people come in, oh, is she married? Does she have children? Does she have a family? And then when they see that you have that, they tick it up for you. Now, what has she been able to achieve in life? And then they are seeing all these things and ticking it up for you. But then there was still this resistance that we can't just have a woman as our president. We can't bow to the woman, you know. So it's a strong tradition, but I believe that engineering should overcome this. I mean, we've been so exposed to know that engineering, for me, I always tell people actually that engineering is actually a feminine profession. It's only the
Really?
African tradition that has left as a male. Yeah, and I'll tell you why I say that.
Yes.
If you look at the innate gift from God on the woman, is a problem-solving mind.
Yes.
She's very calculative. She's very innovative. She has to take care of the home front. When there is nothing in the home, she makes do with what she has there. And that's what engineering is all about. Being able to make things happen better at the barest and least economic value addition. You understand what I mean? You are cost effective, you are innovative. These are gifts that God has given to the woman. They are natural gifts. And so when you
Okay, there's a stop here.
bring that into engineering, you realize that generally engineering is a feminine profession. Yes. And we need to really let them know that they are taking our space.
Yes.
Really?
We
need to let men know that they are taking our space. Engineering is feminine. And what I
am so happy to hear you say that. We had a small technical glitch, but I'm very happy you said that, because it changes the whole principle on which we are sort of moving forward, right? So here's the question. Yeah. Here's the question. When we think then about the future, 2030, right? Because we're using that and the history of leadership, right? We have seen 2 women presidents in Africa, Joyce Banda in Malawi and the woman from Liberia, who's
Sally Johnson,
Right. So have we seen a rise in women in politics in Nigeria, and any of those coming out of the engineering principle? Because I feel a lot of engineers in general tend to stay behind, and it's the lawyers who come forward. Are we seeing engineers like yourself? Because again, if the foundation of development is going to be the practical principles, how can we get more women who are in engineering to take up policy and political leadership? How do we do that?
That's a tough one, because even the men in engineering are rarely going into politics. Yes. So for the women right now in Nigeria, I think I can just pinpoint 1-2 women who I've seen in politics. One who actually got to the National Assembly and was in the lower house. But after her first term also, I mean, they didn't give her a second chance to come back. So she's the only female engineer I've seen really involved in politics, sincerely, you know. And it's tough for her now, struggling to find her way back to the National Assembly. So, but for the men, again, like I said, we have very few men in engineering who have dared into politics. But
wait. Okay, I'm going to take the question again, because you were saying something very important and I won't be able to get it. So my question was, so how can we get more women to consider, who are in engineering, to consider going into politics? Because, for example, in China, we see a lot of the senior politicians in China are engineers, and their society, it may not be democratic, but it functions in terms of growth and development. What are you hearing about women get into politics in Nigeria? And what about women in engineering going into politics? Are you seeing any of that?
I tell you, the possibility is very, very slim. In the past 16 years of democracy in Nigeria, I've only seen just 1 female engineer who dared to go into the politics and even occupy the position. She was in the lower house of the parliament, and they only gave her a chance. The second year, they did not give her a chance to come up. And even looking at our male counterparts, we are very bad politicians, because I think maybe because of the rigidity of our training, we find it difficult to survive in the political terrain. But in recent times, we've realized that if you want to develop your country and you want to play a role in the leadership of the country, then you must get into politics. So there is a refocus now in exposing engineers, male and female, to the possibility of getting into politics and how to play the politics to be relevant. So there are a lot of pep talks now for the engineers to get very involved. But for the female engineers, I think we still have a long way to go to get them into politics.
I have a question. It's a different direction altogether. I'm looking at the
Yeah.
future again. We see a lot of very dark and dystopian futures, right? Most of the
Yeah.
films about the future are negative. But we know that what we see is what we become. There's a lot of self-fulfilling prophecy.
I agree.
Now, Nigeria
Yeah.
has a very big film industry, right? What are you seeing
Yeah.
in terms of the way women's leadership is depicted in the films that are coming out of Nollywood?
Yeah, some of them have been good, but I think recently they've been coming up with better themes, positioning the woman to be able to achieve. I remember I watched one that actually they were trying to position the woman as a governor, and she had all that it took to be the governor of the state.
Yes.
But then they had the cabals who were doing everything to stop her from getting in there, you know. So
Yes.
they're beginning to see it. I think because of the way things are played out in Nigeria,
Yes.
and the few women who have been exposed to leadership in different fields, whether medical, in the law, or whatever environment, even in industry, they've seen them with high level of integrity and commitment to what they do.
Yes.
And so the Nollywood is beginning to portray the Nigerian woman as a better leader. But there's still a lot to be done, because you still see most of them seeing the woman just wanting to keep the home front, wanting to make sure the men achieve their goals and things like that. But there has been a great improvement, but then they cannot change the story unless we make them change the story.
Yes.
If they
Yes.
don't interact with us and we
Yes.
don't interact with them, they don't get to know what we're doing and what we can do. I remember I was on the Nigerian Television Authority some time ago,
Yes.
and they're like, we didn't know that there were women who have achieved this much
Wow.
as engineers in Nigeria.
Yes.
And so we need to interact more with them. And that's because of our training. We just want to do our job, solve the problem, make our name within the engineering, and go back to our homes. But we need to be a little bit more active in the social scene. And I'm trying to even build myself. I'm not active in the social scene, but I'm beginning to build myself and talk to the other younger ladies that there is need for them, the younger ones now, to
Yes.
build themselves in engineering and in the social scene, so they
Yes.
know what we are doing and what we are worth.
Yes.
If we don't relate with them, we can't change the story.
Yeah, because science has done some research that shows that for any major social change to happen, you need 10% of a population to have the same worldview. We have
Yeah.
thought of Nigeria as being the most populous black country in the world. We have thought of Nigeria as a country that should be leading the way in Africa, and we're not seeing that in terms of leadership around energy. We're a country that produces oil, for example. You're still having
Yeah.
power challenges. So as you think about Nigeria future, African future, engineering futures, right? How might your
Yeah.
work as the world vice president of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations and your former leadership role in the Women Nigerian Engineering Association, how might you kind
Yeah.
of use those spaces to create an alliance that can actually spread what you're doing to the rest of the continent of Africa?
Yeah. Good enough. I also chair the committee for women in engineering for the Federation of African Engineering Organizations. So I get to work with the African women engineers, and
Yes.
we had a grant from the Royal Academy last year on statistical data for women in engineering across some countries.
Yes.
And one of our findings was the fact that the younger generation says there were no female role models across Africa in engineering for them to relate with. They
Yes.
could see the doctors, they could see the lawyers, they could see the artists and the actresses, but they're not seeing the female engineers. Sorry, that came on. Did you put it on?
No, it just came on. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. Just go ahead.
All right. And so one of the things we agreed when we had a meeting in Rwanda was that we're going to do a documentary across the continent and then begin to show it. We're looking for sponsors for that project now because we realize that we need to show ourselves. We have women in the oil and gas who have excelled. We have women engineers in the energy sector who have excelled. They've been chief executives in their areas. And we have women also, even in the academia, who are professors and who have been heads of departments and researchers. So we thought we must do a documentary, and we are working on that right now. And so this is bringing a synergy within the African continent for the women engineers, and we believe we want to be able to showcase ourselves and also help ourselves into leadership. And Nigeria might not have had a female engineer lead the Nigerian Society of Engineers, but Zimbabwe has had a female engineer lead them. Ghana has a female engineer as the president of the Ghana Institute of Engineers right now.
Wow.
And so I believe more countries, they are doing very, very well. So I believe more countries, as we work together and build capacity amongst ourselves, we'll be able to really bring out the female engineer in Africa to where she ought to be. Sincerely, if you go around Africa, you see a lot of women that have achieved. And I mean, I'm going to be very happy before the end of this year to put that documentary in the international scene. I look forward to concluding that project.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So as we draw to a close now, Valerie, we're talking about the future. We're talking about a documentary to show the next generation of young girls in high school right now what they need to be doing. We've talked about also how we can create like village level engineering, core using the village women as a basis for new design thinking. Tell me, put yourself into 2030 and picture yourself 12 years older and picture what is a headline that you would like to see based on your accomplishments as the vice president for the World Federation of Engineering Organizations.
I would like to see a caption, developing a better environment for humanity. Female engineer tops it in her design. I would like to see us creating solutions. I would like to see the young female engineer not just wanting to look for a white collar job, but wanting to be an employer of labor because she has seen and knows how to change and make the life better for them. We are all engineers make life better, and I want to see the female engineer at the forefront of having a better community for people to dwell in. So I look forward to that, and I will be glad to mentor as many female students as possible to be able to get.
So one word, are you pessimistic, optimistic, or neutralistic about this possibility?
I'm very optimistic about the future. I believe the young girl will change the story.
We have been talking to in this session, Valerie Agebragba. She's in a position to be optimistic about the future as she serves as the Vice President of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, as well as the Vice President of the Network of Women Engineering Organizations in the continent of Africa. Thank you so much for joining us on Future Sense Now.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and I hope we can talk more on the future of the women engineers across the globe. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. All right, folks, thank you for joining us on Future Sense Now, where we explore salient ideas for sustainable futures. We have come to the end of a great conversation, technical challenges notwithstanding, but the story continues to be written by all of us. Creating the future we want is our shared responsibility, and engineers play a significant role in that. Remember, it is better for us to act as the parent of the future than the child of our past. So let us seize the day and go out and create the future we want. As we say in Jamaica, walk good and safe journeys.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Future Sense Now with Dr. Claire Nelson, brought to you by the Futures Forum. For more, please visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share the future.